O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name and for the welfare of all our people. Amen. We acknowledge we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishin, Inuak, Dakota, Oate, Dene, Suline, and Nihithawag nations. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and the intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Good morning, everybody. Please be seated, and I have a statement. Orders of the day, private members' business, and I have a statement. I am advising the House that I have received a letter from the official opposition House Leader regarding her caucus's final selected bill for this session. As a reminder to the House, Rule 25 permits each recognized party to select up to 3 private members' bills per session to proceed to a second reading vote. The official opposition House Leader has advised that her caucus has selected Bill 226, the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening Amendment Act, as the third and final selected bill from the official opposition caucus for this session. In accordance with the official opposition House Leader's letter, the process on this bill will proceed as follows. Second reading will begin at 10:30 a.m. The question shall be put on the second reading motion this morning at 10:55 a.m. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. First, pursuant to Rule 34(8), I am announcing that the private members' resolution to be considered on the next Thursday of private members' business will be one put forward by the Honourable Member for Point Douglas. The title of the resolution is Calling on the Provincial Government to Prioritise MMIWG 2S by Implementing the National Inquiry's Calls to Justice.
It has been announced that the private members' resolution to be considered on the next Thursday of private members' business will be the one put forward by the Honourable Member for Point Douglas. The title of the resolution is Calling on the Provincial Government to Prioritise MMIWG2S by Implementing the National Inquiry's Calls for Justice. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. Would you call for a second reading debate from 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Bill 204, the Drivers and Vehicles Amendment Act, license plates for MMIWG2S awareness?
It has been announced that the House will consider second reading of Bill 204 this morning for the first half hour. Therefore, I will call second reading Bill 204, the Drivers and Vehicles Amendment Act, license plates for MMIWG2S awareness. The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Madam Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from St. John's, that Bill 204, the Driver and Vehicles Amendment Act, license plates for MMIWG awareness, now be read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Point Douglas, seconded by the Honourable Member for St. John's, that Bill number 204, the Drivers and Vehicles Amendment Act, license plates for MMIWG2S awareness, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House. The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Madam Speaker, I just want to begin by sending our condolences to June Johnson's family, the community, and of course all of her friends. She is another woman that's been taken too soon in our community, which is why it's so important to create awareness through this license plate, and certainly to set up some funds for children who are left behind due to their parent being taken through violence. This bill has been worked on for the last couple of years in cooperation with families who have asked for this for a while now, and we've been working on 2 different designs because we have, families that we represent that are two-spirited, that don't wear dresses, and wanted something symbolic that would, represent them. So certainly the hand is something that the families, the 2S families have supported and would like to see. And, it's something that we need to certainly listen to the families. Families tell me often that their voices are not heard, that they feel like their loved ones are forgotten, that society has forgotten their loved ones, and society has turned their back on the issue altogether. So this license plate will help community, society, Manitobans, Winnipeggers, all across our province, be educated on what's happening here in Manitoba, and help the families to have hope that things will shift, things will change, because it's going to take all of us to do that. The police aren't going to be able to do it alone. The governments aren't going to be able to do it alone. It's going to take all of us as people, as society, to shift the way that we treat each other, to shift the way that we come together when there's a crisis, and certainly to look at prevention, because we are losing way too many Indigenous women in this province and right across Canada and the country. And we as a society need to start doing our part in ensuring that that doesn't continue to happen. And families often will talk to me when I'm at, wherever I am. What is the government doing to address, the high rates of violence that are happening in our city and in our province? And there's not a lot I can point to in terms of prevention. And this license plate would be a part of prevention because it would help people get educated on the issue. But we also need action. We also need to ensure, going past this license plate, that folks have access to the resources that they need. And we have children who want to pursue post-secondary, but have a parent who has been taken through violence, and that leaves one parent or another caregiver, or the child might be in care as a result of their parent's death. The funds generated from these license plates would go into a trust fund for these very children to be able to access, whether they want to go to school to upgrade, whether they want to go into the trades, whether they need a laptop for university, whatever it is that they need to get educated. And we know that poverty has stricken many of our families, and our families need support. My sister, this year will be 15 years that she's been missing. She left behind 4 children. 4 children that have, one parent now that has to rely on one income. And my nieces and nephews have aspirations. They want to pursue post-secondary. But when you have a one-income family, you're put in a situation where you don't have extra funds to be able to put into an education fund. So this very bill would help do that. And I certainly look forward to unanimous support in this House, because families, this is long overdue for them. We as a government need to stand up as leaders, and we need to show them that we care, that we support them, and that we want to do something to address these high numbers. And certainly this is one step of many that we need to move forward on. Miigwech.
A question period of up to 10 minutes will be held. Questions may be addressed to the sponsoring member by any member in the following sequence. First question to be asked by a member from another party. This is to be followed by a rotation between the parties. Each independent member may ask one question, and no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. Are there any questions? The Honourable Member for Kiewitnik.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'd like to thank my colleague from Point Douglas for her advocacy and her work on this file. I'd like to ask a question. How many families have been impacted by tragic losses? How have families been impacted by the tragic loss and murders of their mothers, daughters, sisters, wives, and friends?
The Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, and I thank my colleague for that question. You know, certainly I can speak from my experience and, you know, meeting with families for the last 15 years. It's been quite traumatic. It not only affects the family, but it affects, you know, the people around the family. It affects the community. I know that Indigenous women don't feel safe leaving their house. They're 7 times more likely to face violence and never to be seen again. And these are high statistics. You know, no one should ever have to worry about leaving their house and not coming home. So families have multiple loved ones who have also been murdered or gone missing. And it's affected them in a way that some
The
families
member's
don't
time
even
has
leave their house.
expired. Further questions? If not, the floor is open for debate. Is there any debate on this motion? If not, is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is second reading of Bill number 204, the Drivers and Vehicles Amendment Act, license plates for MMIW G2S awareness. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed and so ordered. I declare the motion carried. The Honourable Member.
Thank you.
The Honourable Member for McPhillips.
Madam Speaker, I'm seeking if it's the will of the House to see the vote is unanimous.
Is it the will of the House to consider that that motion was carried unanimously? Leave has been granted. So the motion is carried unanimously. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Miigwech, Madam Speaker. Is it the will of the House to call it 10:30?
Is it the will of the House to call it 10:30? Leave has been granted. And as earlier determined then, we will now move to second reading of Bill 226, the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening Amendment Act. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the member for St. James, that Bill number 226, the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Union Station, seconded by the Honourable Member for St. James, that Bill number 226, the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening Amendment Act, be now read a second time and be referred to a committee of this House. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. While I am somewhat disappointed that I've had to bring this bill back now for a third time, I'm hopeful that given the awareness and the education that has been garnered around CMV, congenital cytomegalovirus, that we'll all be unified in supporting this bill today. So in 2008, Rob and Michelle Tertrault had a son, Alexander. And Alexander, when he was born, did not appear to be symptomatic for CMV. It was only thanks to an ultrasound that they realized that their son, their beautiful newborn baby boy, did in fact have CMV, and he was able to receive the treatment that he needed as a newborn, and now he's a healthy kid growing up. And as a result of their experience, Rob and Michelle created CMV Canada. And they created this foundation in the hopes that they could generate awareness and education and raise money for research around CMV and ensure that all families across Canada, but certainly here in their home province of Manitoba, would learn about CMV and be able to have their babies screened for CMV as newborns. We know that CMV is the leading cause of non-genetic hearing loss in children. It's also a leading cause of intellectual disabilities. This is a disease that has an incredibly high disease burden impact on the healthcare system. And being able to implement universal newborn screening for CMV would make a huge difference in the health outcomes of newborns in Manitoba. It would improve their outcomes long term. It would ensure that families, many of which have no idea what CMV is, most folks have never heard of it, but thanks to efforts like Rob and his wife, Michelle, more and more folks, including health practitioners, are learning about CMV and the importance of being screened for it within the first 21 days of life. And so, I'm honored to be able to bring this bill forward again. Currently, Rob is running across Manitoba for his foundation. He's running across the province to raise money and awareness and education for CMV. He's done a lot of media on this issue, and he's made it very clear that he hopes that this government, this PC government, will do the right thing, support this legislation, and be a leader in Canada in regards to making sure that all babies born in Manitoba have the ability to be screened for CMV. And right now, Saskatchewan has implemented this universal newborn screening. Ontario was the leader in doing it first. We know that babies, over 100 babies are born in Manitoba with CMV, and most of those newborns are asymptomatic, meaning that they don't have symptoms that would cause someone to think they have CMV. And so we have an opportunity today collectively to support the efforts of a family that, even though their son had a good outcome and they were able to make sure he had treatment early as a newborn and he's living a healthy life, they made the efforts to make sure that they raised awareness and are fighting so that all families have that opportunity. And I think that is a testament to the good nature of Manitobans, that even if folks have a good outcome through what can be a scary experience, they're going to put in the work to make sure that their neighbors and fellow community members, fellow Manitobans, also have access to the healthcare that they need in order for their babies to be born and raised and live healthy lives. And so, I'm obviously very happy to answer questions on this issue, but the most important point for us to leave here with today is this is an opportunity that we have collectively as legislators to make sure that all babies born in Manitoba are screened for CMV and have the best chance at good healthcare outcomes. We can do that simply by passing this legislation today in the House, and I sincerely hope that unanimously we'll make that decision. Thank you.
In accordance with the earlier announcement, the vote for this bill will now take place at 10:40, and the rest of the morning debate will also move forward by 15 minutes. A question period of up to 10 minutes will be held. Questions may be addressed to the sponsoring member by any member in the following sequence. First question to be asked by a member from another party. This is to be followed by a rotation between the parties. Each independent member may ask only one question, and no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. Are there any questions? The Honourable Member for Springfield-Rashott.
Can the member opposite please explain how this bill will maintain best practice and evidence-informed practice, given that these are constantly evolving technologies?
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
I thank the member for that question. Part of the importance of this bill is it's going to ensure that medical practitioners across the province have the education and awareness to implement this into their practice when it comes to newborn health care. And that's really a fundamental step that right now isn't fully in place, and this bill would help support that being put into practice. The other thing to note is that the cost of a test right now is around $10. It's highly cost beneficial to our system, and actually the rates and the costs are decreasing as technology improves. It's really a benefit across the board.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you. I just want to start by thanking my colleague, the member for Union Station, for all they do in this province to improve healthcare outcomes, but also for bringing a bill forward 3 times now to respond to this issue with CMV in Manitoba. My question to them is, how will this bill benefit infants living with CMV and their families?
The honourable member for Union Station.
I thank my colleague from St. James for his kind words and that really great question. So it is so critical that newborns are tested within the first 3 weeks, within the first 21 days of life, in order to maximize the benefits of the medication and the treatments available. We know that the treatments available can reduce the incidence of hearing loss by 55, can improve outcomes by 55%. That is significant, but really the most impactful, beneficial way to make sure that we give babies the best chance of good healthcare outcomes is within the first 21 days. And so it's crucial that this is implemented and put into practice for babies within that window of time.
The honourable member for Borderland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's always good to know when a bill is brought forward who the member consulted with, and I'm wondering if they could just share a little bit more about who they consulted with.
The honourable member for Union Station.
I thank my colleague from Borderland for that question. It is a very important question, and I'm happy to answer that. So clearly, I've already mentioned Rob and Michelle, who are the founders, who created the CMV Foundation. But there's also a ton of research out there. We're really lucky, actually, to have a lot of research on this issue. So whether you're looking at the American Medical Association, you can also look to Montreal. You've got the pediatrics and microbiology and immunology department there. There's a lot of great evidence and research out of the United States, but actually I would say more relevant here in Canada. We've got a ton of research, and pediatricians across the country support this effort.
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, I thank the member for bringing this legislation forward. It's my assessment that by screening these kids and saving what could be lifelong problems, that you're actually going to save quite a bit of money for the healthcare system. I wonder if you'd comment.
The honourable member for Union Station.
I thank our colleague for that really important question. The cost savings to our healthcare system would be significant. So we know that CMV nationally has a cost burden of approximately $400 million across the country. We know that the cost burden here in Manitoba is also significant. Again, most babies born with CMV are asymptomatic, and so it's crucial that this screening is implemented to ensure that all babies are screened, and the majority who are asymptomatic would therefore get the treatments in the right amount of time, improve their healthcare outcomes, and decrease the cost burden on our healthcare system, which is massive at this time.
The honourable member for Springfield-Rashad.
Was this bill inspired by the work of former trailblazer MLA Leanne Rowett, who first brought forward the universal newborn hearing screening into the Manitoba Legislature?
The honourable member for Union Station.
This bill has been inspired by families, and so I think it's important that when we talk about any legislation that's being brought forward, to highlight the root of it, and at the root of this bill and the efforts being made around CMV are families. And I should have mentioned that when the member for Borderland asked about consultation. I've talked to families. I've also talked to folks who do work in the hearing loss community. And it's so important that we center families and newborn Manitobans when we talk about this. So I want to thank Rob and Michelle again for their efforts, but I also want to thank all the families across the country and here in Manitoba who are advocating for this bill to be passed.
The honourable member for St. James.
This bill and this focus on CMV screening is a great example of preventative medicine. And I'd like to ask my colleague, how has this current government failed to invest in preventative medicine in Manitoba?
The honourable member for Union Station.
That's a great question. Unfortunately, we've seen this government be very, very reactive to healthcare. We're seeing folks across the province, we're seeing kids in Manitoba having increasingly concerning healthcare outcomes that, had we intervened as early as possible, could have been mitigated. And so this is a really good example of what this government can finally start doing, which is taking a proactive and preventative approach to healthcare at really the earliest stage possible for Manitobans.
Are there any further questions? If not, debate is open. The floor is open for debate. The Honourable Member for Springfield Rashad.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this piece of legislation. As someone who has spent some time here, I remember my colleague Leanne Rowett, who was a pioneer in this kind of legislation. In fact, I believe she brought forward similar pieces of legislation multiple times before it was passed. In fact, it was the NDP. It was under this current leader of the opposition's party that the legislation was deemed to not be necessary, that focusing on children was not important. And this particular issue, although it is rare, it is very important that it be identified quickly. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Leanne and the work that she did tirelessly. And she was never one to back down. She kept introducing it to finally it was adopted, rightfully so. For those of us who've been present when a baby is born and know of how difficult that process is, and what a miracle it is when a child is born, and what a beautiful moment that is. But there are a lot of hazards, and if we were to go back in history, we would now be able to identify why it is that there was such a high infant mortality rate. And without going into details today, there are many things that can go wrong. There are things that led to children passing away soon after birth, and there are things that, if on a preventative basis be done quickly, can certainly help the child not just survive, but also grow and move on through an education process and move on with life. So these kinds of tests are important. There is already some process in place for this. This legislation reinforces a lot of what's being done and adds more encouragement into the process, because one of the last things as a parent that you consider when you get this beautiful pink bundle of joy into your arms is that, does a child have hearing issues? Is there potential for the child to have a problem? I mean, that's the last thing you're thinking about. Probably one of the first things you do is, as most parents, is you count the fingers and the toes. It's just funny. That's one of the things you do. You count those little fingers and the little toes, and the baby's usually laying on the warming tray, and the warming tray is beeping, and the baby usually is crying, curled up, testing, you know, this new world of now room where you're not restricted by how far your feet can go or your hands can go. And the last thing you're thinking at that moment is, we should have a hearing test done. Having been in this situation 3 times, that would be the last thing we would have thought about. Should we have a quick hearing test done on this beautiful new life? And I think that this is important. I would say to anybody who's gone through this process, it's a beautiful process, and probably these tests are great, and they certainly will help the child in the long term.
Is there further debate? The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, a few words on the record in terms of this bill, which is to have universal screening for cytomegalovirus. Cytomegalovirus is a significant infection, and if not screened for and treated early on, it can be a long-term health issue, and so it can be very valuable to to screen and detect and help those newborns who have cytomegalovirus infections. And so I'm in strong support of this legislation, and I hope we're able to get it passed today. Newborn screening began as early as the early 1960s, perhaps even before. But in one of the major early screening programs was for phenylketonuria. And this was a disease which was universally very damaging to the brain and ended up, in many cases, in death of the child. And it was discovered that you could treat phenylketonuria with a diet, and that these children would do very well. The diet is a diet low in phenylalanine, which is the amino acid which was building up. And it causes, when it accumulates, it causes brain damage. And when it was recognized that this was readily treatable, and when a screening process was found for screening for phenylketonuria, then the screening program started primarily in the 1960s. And I think that in Manitoba, it was probably toward the end of the 1960s that we started screening every child born in Manitoba for phenylketonuria. Gradually over the years, more and more conditions have been added to this list, and we now screen for many, many conditions, and this is a very positive thing. The member for Springfield was talking about the universal newborn hearing screening, and this is a bill which amends the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening Act. The bill to have universal newborn hearing screening was first introduced by myself, and then I worked with Leanne Rowett, and we got it passed in 2013. It became effective in 2016. And to provide an example of the amazing impact that the universal newborn hearing screening has, I talked quite recently to a physician who's an otolaryngologist who looks after children with hearing problems. And the problem before there was universal newborn hearing screening was that these children were being found when they were 3 or 4 or 5, at which time many of them already were starting to have difficulties in developing language, in speaking fluently. And the marvelous thing about the universal newborn hearing screening is that these children are now detected very early on. They can have, for example, a cochlear implant at age 6 to 9 months. Their hearing can be corrected, and these children then develop not only their hearing early, but their speaking patterns, because speech depends on hearing, and if you don't have the ability to hear early on, then your ability to learn to speak can be impaired. And so it is phenomenal to see kids now who would have had speech impairments who are now doing and detecting very early, who are doing absolutely phenomenally because there was universal newborn hearing screening. And I am hopeful that we will see with the cytomegalovirus screening that we will see a significant impact. We've already heard that the total across the country is in the order of about 400 million, I think that's annually. And so there's tremendous cost savings. It is adding on a screening process. It's true that there is some cost to that, but it makes a big difference in the lives of children, and through preventing problems, it actually enables our whole healthcare system to function better and save costs in one area and money that can be used then for other areas of healthcare, where we have many desperate needs. So I rise now to speak on this, to support it strongly, and hope that we will be able to get it passed and move forward on cytomegalovirus screening for all newborns in Manitoba. Thank you.
Is there any further debate on this motion? If not, is the House ready for the question? The question before the House is second reading of Bill number 226, the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening Amendment Act. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed. Agreed and so ordered. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader?
Madam Speaker, a recorded vote, please.
A recorded vote having been called, call in the member. Oh, sorry. All those in favor of the motion? No. A recorded vote having been requested? Yep. In accordance with Rule 24(7), this vote will be deferred to
11:40.
11:40 a.m. this morning. The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Madam Speaker, is there leave to call it 11:40?
No, to call 11 o'clock. Resolution 11.
Is there leave of the House?
Because 10:40 is actually 11.
Oh, the Honourable Official Opposition House Leader, in order for Hansard to pick that up.
Madam Speaker, is there the will of the House to call it 11 a.m.?
Is it the will of the House to call it 11 a.m.? And we will be revisiting the time of the vote now as we proceed. So the hour is now 11 a.m. and time for private members' resolutions. The resolution before us this morning is the resolution on condemning the provincial government for failing to uphold the right to housing for all Manitobans, brought forward by the Honourable Member for Wolseley. The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the member for Notre Dame, that to condemn the provincial government for failing to uphold the right to housing.
Therefore, be it resolved.
Just jump right. Sorry. I move, seconded by the member for Notre Dame. Therefore, be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba condemn the provincial government for failing to uphold the right to housing for all Manitobans and for selling off hundreds of social housing units, failing to build new units, cutting the repair and maintenance budget by millions of dollars, and cutting rent assist.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Wolseley, seconded by the Honourable Member for Notre Dame. Therefore, be it resolved that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba condemn the provincial government for failing to uphold the right to housing for all Manitobans and for selling off hundreds of social housing units, failing to build new units, cutting the repair and maintenance budget by millions of dollars, and cutting rent assist. The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm bringing this PMR forward today because it is very clear to me now, as I near the end of my first term as an MLA, that housing is one of the most critical issues facing my constituents. Each winter finds many of my constituents living in bus shelters, and in milder weather, it reveals that folks are living in parks, on riverbanks, and in parking lots. There's communities of homeless folks right outside my constituency office every summer, and throughout the constituency, where it used to perhaps, there used to be tents in one park, now it's in 3 or 4, making it very difficult for children and families to use parks for what they were intended for, but making it far more difficult for those folks living in such unsafe housing conditions. This issue is replicated across the city, And more homelessness is happening in northern and rural regions across the province. So it's very important to me to stand here today to state that housing is a right. Housing is a right that all Manitobans should have access to. Access to housing is essential to the inherent dignity and well-being of people and to building sustainable and inclusive communities. The federal government recognizes housing as a human right, and other provinces have also put forward legislation which affirms the right to housing. Unfortunately, the PC government has failed to uphold this right. They have sold off social housing and failed to build any new units. They have approved above guideline rent increases, and they have cut rent assist. Madam Speaker, the United Nations first recognized housing rights in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It has since reaffirmed housing rights in 7 core human rights treaties. The 1966 International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights contains the UN's broadest recognition of the right to housing. And I quote, "The right of everyone to an adequate standard of living for himself and his family, including adequate housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions." I know we all can agree that the language is dated, but the intent is very much the same. 22 countries have enshrined justiciable housing rights in their constituencies. Together, they recognize a range of freedoms and entitlements connected to the right to housing. While many of these nations include housing as a standalone right, others recognize it as a part of other rights, such as the rights for children. And some countries include special rights for certain groups of people, such as low-income families or those living with disabilities. Others grant the right to a certain standard of living or housing. For example, in Venezuela, Venezuelans have a right to adequate, safe, and comfortable hygienic housing. Housing rights can thus amount to much more than a roof over one's head. Most definitions also specify that housing must be adequate. Adequacy means that housing meets social, economic, environment, or cultural needs. Several of us in the legislature, myself and the member for Notre Dame, and others, have focused on some of the very concerning housing conditions that exist, where some of the most vulnerable people in our city are living. In fact, primarily folks who have been moved from public encampments into housing, but housing that's not adequate, housing where doors don't lock, where anyone can enter the building, where there's regular violence and dangers, regular overdoses, deaths, shooting, knives sticking out of the wall, sewage running through the basement, needles lying around on the floor, and where the owners are profiting a substantial amount through money that they receive from EIA and from this government because nobody is enforcing any standards. And it's completely shameful, not only that we have people living in parks, but that we have people in 2023 living in housing conditions such as this, where we're talking families with small children, as well as, regular adults who deserve a safer place to live. And so it's not just about housing, it's about adequate housing. In addition, the fulfillment of housing rights may differ from one person to the next, depending on their circumstances. For example, people with disabilities may have a right to priority access to government housing programs. The UN Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the treaty body charged with monitoring the implementation of the 1966 International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, offers 2 sets of general comments that define adequacy in relation to housing rights under that covenant, and they are arguably the most widely accepted definition. The CESCR's 1991 General Comment Number 4 lists 7 characteristics of adequate housing, and they are as follows. Legal security of tenure, which means people have protection against forced eviction, harassment, and other threats. Availability of services, materials, facilities, and infrastructure, so that housing contains the resources necessary for health, security, comfort, and nutrition. Affordability. Housing costs do not prevent people from satisfying their other basic needs. And habitability. So housing contains adequate space, guarantees physical safety, and protects occupants from the environment, health threats, and structural hazards. Accessibility. Housing must be accessible to those entitled to it, and disadvantaged groups are given some degree of priority consideration in the housing sphere. Location. Housing is situated away from polluted sites and allows access to employment options, healthcare services, schools, childcare centers, and other social facilities. And cultural adequacy. The way housing is constructed, the building materials used, and the policies supporting these appropriately enable the expression of cultural identity and diversity of housing. In addition to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, 6 core UN human rights treaties include specific housing rights as part of other rights, and these are as follows. The International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Families, and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Collectively, these treaties recognize all persons' rights to adequate housing without distinction as to their gender, ability, race, color, and national or ethnic origin. They also enshrine the right of all people to protection against arbitrary or unlawful interference with their home. The Canadian Human Rights Act prohibits discrimination in employment and services under federal jurisdiction, including housing. And in addition, the National Housing Strategy Act, which was passed in 2019, recognizes housing as a human right. It declares that the Government of Canada's housing policy recognizes that the right to adequate housing is a fundamental human right affirmed in international law. It recognizes that housing is essential to the inherent dignity and well-being of the person and to building inclusive communities. And it supports improved housing outcomes for the people of Canada and furthers the progressive realization of the right to adequate housing as recognized in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. The Act requires the federal government to maintain a national housing strategy taking into account key principles of a human rights-based approach to housing. But it's not just the federal government. Here in Manitoba, in our Human Rights Code, the definition of social disadvantage includes a characteristic protected against some forms of discrimination. It means diminished social standing or social regard due to characteristics including homelessness or inadequate housing. Section 13 protects people on Section 9 grounds from unreasonable discrimination with respect to any service, accommodation, facility, program, or privilege normally available to the public, with some exceptions for age. There's much more to share about the Human Rights Code and about the PC failures on housing in Manitoba, but fortunately, since I'm almost out of time, there's the opportunity for many of my colleagues to speak on those failures in the hour we have ahead. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Good job, Lisa.
A question period of up to 10 minutes will be held, and questions may be addressed in the following sequence. The first question may be asked by a member from another party. Any subsequent questions must follow a rotation between parties. Each independent member may ask one question, and no question or answer shall exceed 45 seconds. The floor is open for questions. Before I recognize questions, I just need to explain how the rest of the morning is going to run. So, we're delving into the manipulation of space and time here. So, as the House called at 11 at 10:38, the deferred vote will happen on Bill 226 at 11:33. And then the House would recess 5 minutes later at 11:38, unless that vote that we call at 11:33 goes beyond 11:38, in which case we finish what we started with the vote, and then the House recesses after the vote. The bells are going to ring for 5 minutes. That's what the rules stipulate for these situations. They cannot ring more than 5 minutes. I feel like saying any questions, but I don't know if I can say that here. So let's go on with the question period and ask the clerks if you have any, if any of that isn't clear. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the question period. I'm going to recognize the Honourable Member for Dauphin. The Honourable Member for Dauphin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to say Rent Assist keeps housing affordable for Manitobans with low income, and each year benefits are indexed to reflect 75% of the assessed median market rent. But in 2021-22, the Manitoba government increased the indexation rate from 75 to 80% for families not enrolled in EIA, meaning some families receive up to $80 more per month. Can the member opposite explain how providing more money to individuals assessing rent assist is a cut?
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Well, there may be some families who have experienced a slight increase in rent assist over the last couple of years. What we're also seeing is that there have been cuts to rent assist, to who qualifies for rent assist and who is receiving it. More of my constituents are not receiving it that I believe should be receiving it. And there have also been cuts to social housing during that time, making it more difficult for people to find an affordable place to live.
The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's always an honor to get up here representing the people of Transcona and having the opportunity to debate consequential PMRs such as this brought forward by my colleague, the member for Wolseley. I'd like the member for Wolseley to reflect on her previous role as a school trustee and her current role as an MLA, and why is it important that we recognize the right for housing for all Manitobans?
Great question.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you to the member for Transcona for actually making that link between schools, education, and housing. In my experience as a school trustee, one of the greatest barriers to school attendance, obviously for many children, as we've repeated many times in this House, is food, lack of nutrition. But in many cases, students were not living in places with adequate housing. So some older students may have been couch surfing, kids transitioning out of CFS may not have had the appropriate resources to allow them to live in a safe place. And in some cases, entire families are living in inappropriate housing conditions where there's so much noise at night, no one's getting any sleep, they're dealing with bed bugs, they're dealing with, heat turned off. It makes it hard to...
Member's time has expired. The Honourable Member for Springfield-Richard.
Has the member opposite spoken to the member for Fort Garry, her NDP colleague, who raised rent for many Manitobans above guidelines during his time on the RTB?
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thanks. I'm not going to take any time with a fictional question on a fictional topic, but I am going to say that right now, this government has a fictional MLA. This government has had 7 years to make a change and make a difference, and all they've done is roll things back when it comes to housing. There's no way they can have another term and cause further harm to homeless Manitobans.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I note that the members quotes a number of 1,200 people experiencing homelessness in Winnipeg. My guess is that the number is actually much larger than that, and that's a significant undercount. I wonder if the member would comment.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you for that question. I'm literally looking back at my notes because I don't even recall quoting that number. I know that every year there are housing advocacy groups that who do a survey to understand what the housing numbers look like, and every year that number grows. And it's also not accurate because it doesn't reflect people who are couch surfing or who have not been able to be reached by those community organizations.
The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Like I said earlier, this is an incredibly important PMR that we're debating this morning, and I want to thank the member for Wolseley for continuing to passionately really advocate for something that Manitobans really care a lot about. We do know the important roles that schools play in a lot of this piece. Can she reflect a little bit on how housing permanence and predictability can really impact a student's performance at school?
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Housing permanence is everything when it comes to students getting to school and staying at school. I know during my time at Winnipeg School Division and prior to my time there, there was a very strong push to try to encourage families to keep a child in the same school for a full year because of the meaningful impact on their learning. Unfortunately, that the focus is only on families and what they can't, the choices they can make. But when people are constantly evicted or forced to move around because of costs or bed bugs or inadequate safe housing, it really impacts on the ability for a child to stay in the same school for a full year.
The Honourable Member for Springfield-Richard.
Well, Mr. Speaker, undisputed fact that the NDP member for Fort Garry was on the RTB. Undisputed fact that he voted rent increases for tenants. Can the member answer, did she speak to the NDP member for Fort Garry, why he is offside with this resolution?
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Everybody in this caucus is in support of this resolution and is fighting for adequate housing for Manitobans.
Order. 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 Order, please. The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. And again, like I said earlier, I want to thank my colleague, the member for Wolseley, for bringing forth this consequential PMR. We need to be discussing these pieces when we're here in the House. This is what Manitobans expect us to do when they elect us to represent them here in the House. It's interesting that we're not having any real debate when it comes to questions from the from the government benches, but I will ask this next question is, how has this government failed to provide Manitobans with affordable housing, especially for young families that are trying to get started?
Order. The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This government has failed to build a single unit of social housing or affordable housing during their 7 years in government, and instead they have sold off units and they have cut maintenance budgets. They ended their freeze to evictions and rent increases in the middle of the pandemic, and of course, the education property tax credit for renters was also cut by 25% while giving corporate landlords huge breaks.
Good job.
Are there any further questions? The Honourable Member for Borderland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the member opposite aware that for the first time ever in this province, we put forward a homeless strategy which adopts a coordinated multi-system approach that includes community-led solutions, which has an aim to end homelessness in Manitoba?
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am profoundly aware that in an election year, literally minutes before an election, this government took some public action and made a speech about what they were going to do about housing, but we haven't seen it happen yet. We don't know that it's ever going to happen. But this party will have a plan and will change homelessness in this province.
Right on, Lisa.
The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. And once again, this is, like I said earlier, an important PMR and one that I'm really learning a lot about as the member for Wolseley is answering these questions. I would like to ask her, is recognizing the right to housing something that housing advocates here in Manitoba and Winnipeg and in our neighborhoods Is that something that they've been calling for?
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the member from Transcona for that question. Absolutely. The Right to Housing Coalition is made up of a number of housing activists and homeless activist groups in this province. They have done the research and made the recommendations. They've actually done the hard work so that the government doesn't have to. They just need to take advice from the experts in this area and follow the recommendations, because everyone in Manitoba deserves a safe, adequate place to live.
The Honourable Member for... Okay, time for questions has expired. We're going to move to debate. The floor is open for debate. The Honourable Member for Dauphin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And again, it's always a pleasure to get up in this House and say a few words on behalf of the constituency of Dauphin. It's been an extreme honor and privilege to do so. And some of the resolutions that are being brought forward by the NDP, they need some correction. They need, because there is some misleading information in there. And in fact, in my constituency, there's I know the NDP government had an affinity, didn't have much of an affinity to help the Dauphin region out with their economic potential. And I can say that as being a lifelong resident in that region, but they did like to seem to grow and support government-sponsored social and low-income housing. That was something they liked to do, but yet they never let the region develop so people could buy and afford their own homes. That wasn't a priority, and there's other issues as well that I'm sure the member is not familiar with, and should merely be made aware of that this NDP call and this condemnation of our government regarding housing is not fair when we look at all the good work that this PC government has done over the last 7 years. Recently, and more recently,
Order.
The Stephenson government, all the great work and investments that are being made into our economy that help both directly and indirectly have addressed the housing issues in Manitoba. Now, the NDP, I recall them saying and getting a little uptight about some sort of electioneering. Well, I look at this resolution and it sure seems that they're a champion for housing for everybody. And that's in line, that is in line with NDP ideology. This is most certainly
Order.
This is most certainly in line with NDP ideology, where we need to provide housing for everybody. But what our BC government has done in the last 7 years is, first of all, address the mess, the tangled mess, the knots left by the NDP in this province, and helped to create an environment for people to own their own homes. And the opportunities that are coming from because of this government, again, not only for people to address their housing needs on their own, but the very important targeted funding supports over the last number of years directed towards social housing and making sure that those dollars go to the people that actually need them, not
Order,
the
please. I'm calling the opposition benches in particular to show some respect, some decorum. This is not an outright ban on heckling. If there is an appropriate heckle, I'm not calling that out. I'm calling out the incessant, nonstop mockery, laughter, and side commentary that is accompanying the member who has the floor. So I want to make that distinction. The member for Dauphin has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And this is a very important issue. I will agree. Housing is, one of those major things that we all need. Food and shelter, but far from the NDP approach, where they'll get up on a stage and promise housing for everybody, and we need to make sure that everybody gets a house. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that's just wrong. That's just a wrong approach, and it leads to a lot of bad outcomes. And if we reflect around the world, you can see that where Manitoba, our government, is creating the environment, a very positive environment for people to own their own homes. And this is a stark contrast to the NDP. But for the past 7 years, the PC government has done more to create and develop a positive, strong, and vibrant Manitoba economy, giving people the opportunity to buy their own homes, and making sure that real and sincere social housing supports are going to those people that really need it. That is so important versus the revolving door approach of the NDP, where you wanted these people to come into the social system. We need to create jobs build housing for these people, while you completely ignore and in fact stifle the growth of this province. This is no more clear than in the Dauphin region. And I'm just going to reflect one other thing, and one member of the NDP that applauded MinCom and how he was so happy to go in there and sign up for that state income assistance. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that message from that member of the NDP had incredible damage in the Parkland region. And it had incredible damage for decades, and it still exists today. But our PC government is finally addressing that issue and allowing that region to develop and grow, address the housing issues on their own. Plus, this PC government has done tremendous work in focused support towards the people that need it. And it was mentioned already once, and this is such a great announcement, something I'm incredibly proud of. The government understands that addressing homelessness calls for a coordinated, multifaceted approach, and this is why, for the first time, a government put forth a homeless strategy, a place for everyone. A strategy is based on housing-first approach and aligns with rights-based approach to housing. Mr. Deputy Speaker, what is important about this? This is a great initiative, but if the NDP was in power and in the background, it means nothing. It is just another circle around the revolving door. But what's this PC government's been doing has creating a new opportunity for all Manitobans, giving them hope to buy their own homes. So this investment in itself is important. It's only when you bundle it and couple it with the great work of this PC government, that it really, really can help Manitobans across this province. On the issue of poverty, on March 4th, 2019, the government released Pathways to Better Future, Manitoba Poverty Reduction Strategy, and we're well on way to, again, indirectly and directly addressing this. I have only a few more minutes left, but I have to say the support that went towards direct care support workers was absolutely the right thing to do by this PC government. I can't say that loud enough. And the minimum wage increases help as well.
Member's time has expired. The honourable member for Transcona.
I would like to thank my colleagues on this side of the House, Deputy Speaker, for that rapturous applause and giving me the opportunity to speak on this important PMR. As noted in my earlier line of questioning, Deputy Speaker, housing is incredibly important. Permanent, affordable, something that is accessible to people. I just want to correct the record regarding my experience in the 70s regarding a certain government program. That program really helped my family because it was prescient, forward-looking, and we were able to afford certain pieces because a certain NDP government recognized the importance of having programs like that to give people a hand up, as opposed to a hand down. A hand up and brought it properly. So I just wanted to correct that record, because that was incredibly important to our family, and not something that could be trivialized like that member just did a few minutes ago. You know what? That part was really quite offensive and something that really shouldn't be brought to the floor of this House. But on to the PMR, Deputy Speaker. I do recall in my experience as a person that worked in schools, how important predictability and permanence was to families, especially when it comes to housing. What this PMR does is bring forward, Deputy Speaker, how important that is to families. And ultimately, this is an act of reconciliation. This is where we take hard-earned dollars by our Manitoba taxpayers and Canadian taxpayers and put it into areas that are important to create communities that are sustainable and where people can feel a part of something bigger than themselves. I can tell you, I'll go back to my youth as a young person growing up in Transcona. I recall a number of my friends lived in an area, a day in Victoria Avenue, where they were living up on a second floor area. And it wasn't the best place to live, but as kids, what did we know about that? We knew nothing about that, right? We're just kids going to school, Deputy Speaker. But what happened was, along Plessy Road, close to Dugald Road, Manitoba Housing had built the Plessy townhouses, the Plessy Road townhouses in and around the mid-1970s. And what a change it was for the family that lived at Victoria and Day was able to move to a beautiful new Manitoba housing complex that provided not only a great safe place to live, Deputy Speaker, but also provided permanence, where they were able to establish roots and be part of their school community. I remember that distinctly because I remember the pride that my friend took in showing us that unit and how important it was not only to his development, but also to his family to feel part of that community again, to feel something pretty good about being able to say that this is our place and we're going to take care of this place. Now, you say to yourself, Deputy Speaker, why was that particular location chosen? Because, Deputy Speaker, in that time, and I'm sure in times moving forward as well, these Manitoba housing units were built across from light industrial areas. So right now, the Plessy Road townhouses are found across from fairly major employers such as New Flyer Industries, Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation, Burn Brave Farms, Greg Egg, all of those areas that require labor. And where are they getting a lot of this labor from? These units that are built in these areas. Is very important because not only does that housing security provide them a secure place to be that's also safe, but it also provides them the opportunity for economic development, meaning that they can then earn a salary and move out of Manitoba housing so that they can become people that are not only just earning their living, but also becoming part of their communities. That's why this PMR is incredibly important. We have to talk about these things in order for us to get a direction as to where we're going to move with Manitoba housing. As I began my debate, Deputy Speaker, I said that this is important because it's also an act of reconciliation. We talk about that a lot, and it's an important piece. Manitoba needs to take the lead in this area, Deputy Speaker. We have a tremendous responsibility as 57 members of this House to ensure that reconciliation is at the top of everything that we do moving forward. Housing is that basic fundamental piece that we can use as that act of reconciliation, so that we're serious about when we say that we care about the development and the ability of Manitobans to be part of something bigger than themselves. Housing is that foundational piece that remains very, very important. Why, Deputy Speaker? Because it brings dignity. Again, in my role, previous role to being here in this House, I worked with many families that struggled with housing permanency and the ability to find affordable housing. Once that was taken care of, a family was able then to provide permanency and able to provide some predictability for their children as they were attending school. Some of the worst things that can happen to children, especially in early years, is having to move around from place to place to place to place. That creates an incredible amount of insecurity. It doesn't allow them to become connected to their home schools. It doesn't allow them to become connected to their communities. This is a very important piece. I recall housing being built close to schools. It's done on purpose, right? And because of that, you're able to then get a person permanently ensconced into their neighborhood and feel part of something that they can contribute to, and then take tremendous pride in saying that they're from Transcona or they're from Dauphin, right? Because people take pride in where they come from. A government that allows for that permanency and that pride development is something that's quite important. I think it's something that when we're here today talking about this PMR, it's something that we cannot diminish, because we know how important it is for kids to establish permanence in their communities. I mean, I know I talk about my area a lot. A lot of us don't move from where we're from. If you talk to people from Transcona, they've lived in Transcona their entire life, Deputy Speaker. Why? Because we love their neighborhood. And because of that, a number of us benefited from programming like public housing, like MNCOM. That is something that was really important and continues to be, and still influences a lot of my thinking. Many of these units that are in Transcona that we have, unfortunately, have fallen into disrepair, Deputy Speaker. And what we would like through this PMR is to really impart the importance of predictable maintenance schedules so that we can keep kids where they are and they can stay in their home and school communities. It's really important, right? Because we do have issues, of course, with maintenance, other issues, of course, with bed bugs and these kind of things. These are challenges, but challenges that need to be met. And I think there is goodwill in this House to have these challenges met, Deputy Speaker. I don't think there's anybody in here that would discount the importance of having a child in a permanent residence where they can grow and become contributing members of society. This is all very important. Many of us understand that. And I think with this PMR, what it does is it allows us to focus on the importance of pieces like affordable housing. And so when we have places like, I do know the member for Concordia, oh, he just moved. The member from Concordia has talked about the importance of housing in his particular constituency as well. We did have that Panet Road piece that was torn down. It was torn down a number of years ago. Those were important pieces that allowed those people to be part of that community, but we still don't have a plan to replace those units on Panet Road. They were 90 units that need to be replaced and put back into that community. And it would be really important for that community, Deputy Speaker. It's something that we look forward to having put back into the constituency of Concordia. But the other piece, Deputy Speaker, when it comes to housing is that this is recognized not only by the United Nations, but also by other advocacy groups that are right here in Manitoba. And what they're asking for is they're asking for leadership from this government. And we know, Deputy Speaker, that we've had record revenues come in through income tax, through Manitoba Hydro, through federal transfers. And these dollars need to be used and invested into Manitobans so that they can have an establishment of a permanent residence where they can contribute to their communities and have their kids attend schools continually in their neighborhoods. I thank you, Deputy Speaker, for the opportunity to put these few words on the record.
The honourable member for Springfield Richard.
Today we have the opportunity to debate housing in Manitoba. Important that we have these debates. I would like to point out that for 16 years under the NDP, there was no housing strategy. There was very little done. There was no plan. We had the member for Wolseley get up and say they might sort of maybe some point in time have a plan. They just don't have one right now, but they'll come up with one. And they then just want to go on the attack, which is really unfortunate. This is the fictitious approach from the NDP. It's the mistruths they like to put on the record, and they claim that that is debate. So 16 years of government, nothing. 7 years if they sat in opposition in the penalty box, they should have at least have come up with some ideas, something new and creative. Nothing, and now they have a resolution which is just all about attacking. And we know that other than attacking, they don't seem to have much else. In fact, they have their member, the NDP member for Fort Garry, who is on the RTB. And the member for Fort Garry, who at most instances seems to be very preoccupied, not just collecting his pay as an MLA, but also being a lawyer and defending drunk drivers and others. The thing is, the member for Fort Garry voted for rent increases, and now the NDP is trying to explain that away somehow. The member for Wolseley had some kind of an explanation, which, again, we know is just an attempt to try to explain away the member for Garry and the fact that he was an individual who voted for rent increases, and he won't even stand in this chamber this morning and defend what he did. He will not stand and speak to this resolution. Why won't he? Why won't he defend his record? Why doesn't he get up and speak to this?
Order, please. The Honourable Opposition House Leader on a point of order.
Deputy Speaker, I would caution, or I would ask the Deputy Speaker to perhaps review where this member is going with his comments in respect of the member for Fort Garry. I think it's on the cusp or over the line of what we are allowed in this chamber to reflect on for other members.
On the same point of order?
Order at no point in time.
The Honourable Member for Springfield Richard on the same point of order?
Same point of order. At no point in time did the member for Springfield Richard reflect on any member's absence or presence. All he reflected is that maybe individuals should get up and defend themselves, but he never ever mentioned someone's absence or presence.
It's like George Costanza. T-Bone says.
Any other comments on the same point of order? I'm going to rule this as a dispute over the facts. Members are not allowed to reflect on the presence or absence of an individual, of a member from the chamber, from the legislature. It's not a point of order. It is a dispute over the facts. The honourable member for Springfield Richot does have the floor.
Thank you, Ed. And I would like to point out to the member, to all members, is the member for Fort Garry will not get up and defend his record. And you have to ask yourself why, because obviously there is a division in the NDP. They speak one thing one moment, do another thing another moment. Typical of the NDP, certainly the front bench, and it carries over to others in their caucus. How unfortunate, because they want to put themselves up as these defenders of public housing, and then are the same individuals who go out and raise the rents on the same people that they're speaking in favor of today, and then those individuals won't get up and defend what they said. How unfortunate. So after 16 years of nothing, after 7 years of having learned nothing, now they want to talk about housing the last few moments before an election. How unfortunate. They had 7 years to debate this and chose not to. So I would like to point out to the member for Point Douglas, who is going to evidently sit and heckle me the whole time, that maybe she would cede the floor to myself and stop heckling. She heckles the entire...
Order.
The member for St. John's continues to heckle.
Order, please. I'm going to repeat my earlier call for decorum and respect, that the member who has the floor should be permitted to speak without ongoing commentary from others who see things differently. This is a legislature, and those individuals will also have the opportunity to have their say in due time. So I'm calling for decorum. The honourable member for Springfield Richot does have the floor.
Well, there seems to be an awful lot of excitement all of a sudden on the NDP benches. The different factions are now heckling the Conservatives.
Order, please pause the clocks. I'm going to get up as often as I need to and call for decorum. The honourable member for Springfield Richot has the floor. Please restart the clocks.
So first of all, let's talk about basic deduction. And that impacts a lot of individuals. I listened to the member for Transcona intently. He tells a very compelling story. I'd like to point out that someone who lived in an apartment for 6 years during my junior high and high school years in Elmwood. And the heckling doesn't stop in the chamber. You know you have members on the run when all's what they can do is heckle while another member is trying to speak. And the member for St. John's, who talks about respect, shows no respect at any point in time when she's in this chamber. So she might want to respect other members' desire to have a few moments to speak. So the member for Transcona reflected on his time in Transcona. About the same time I was living in Elmwood. I'd like to point out to the member for Transcona, occasionally we actually would allow individuals from Transcona to come to Elmwood High School. Wasn't that often, but there was this healthy rivalry between people from Transcona and Elmwood High School, and clearly we always proved them when it came to sport and other things that we were a better high school than Transcona. But you know, that would be another one of those, it would be a dispute over the facts, so we'll leave it at that one. And basic deduction is very important. It's where we allow individuals to work and keep their money, and that's very important. It is important that under the NDP, it was appalling. We were amongst the lowest in the country, probably amongst the lowest in the world. We are now going to allow not $12,000, but $15,000 of the first money earned by individuals. They get to keep it. And that is so important for individuals who are working and trying to achieve. And the member for St. John's just will not stop heckling. And I would say she should show the respect that she asks for in this House. She refused. And the member for Concordia, I know they just want to shout members down, and that's fine. But basic deduction is so important for individuals who are working, that the first $15,000 that they earn, they get it tax-free. That is so important. And the member for Concordia thinks this is all a joke because he lives in his cushy lifestyle as an MLA, and he thinks this is just all a joke for him. But basic deduction, and certainly for those families who grew up, like we heard from the member for Transcona, who grew up in Elmwood, who grew up in EK, the basic deduction is a big deal because the first $15,000 of what you earn, you will be allowed to keep. Very important for starters. I would like to also point out that our government, amongst other things, has, since March 2016, 827 new social and affordable housing rental units. So we heard from the member for Wolseley, again, mistruths. They will not put any facts on the record. The fact is that there were 827 new social and affordable housing units, and 320 new shelter beds have been developed with funding support from Manitoba Housing. It shows you. And there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm from government benches because we know when the facts are finally put on the record as compared to the mistruths of the NDP. We have done lots for social housing, and seeing as I was heckled most of the time and am not going to be able to get all the comments on the record, I'd like to point out.
Order, please. When this matter is again before the House, the honourable member for Springfield-Richot will have 2 minutes remaining. As previously announced, I'm interrupting this debate to conduct a recorded vote deferred from earlier this morning. Accordingly, a recorded vote having been requested, call in the members, and I remind all members the bells will ring for a maximum of 5 minutes. Order, please. The question before the House is the second reading motion for Bill 226, the Universal Newborn Hearing Screening Amendment Act. We will now move to the votes, beginning with members in the chamber and afterward virtual members. I see 2 online with us this morning. All those in favor of the motion, please rise.
Okay.
Honorable Mr. Reyes.
Honorable Mr. Reyes.
Honorable Ms. Squires.
Honorable Ms. Squires.
Honorable Mr. Smith-Lajmodier.
Honorable Mr. Smith-Lajmodier.
Mr. Altamare.
Mr. Altamare.
Mr. Weeb.
Mr. Weeb.
MLA Fontaine.
MLA Fontaine.
MLA Asquara.
MLA Asaguara.
Mr. Schuler.
Mr. Schuler.
Honorable Mr. Johnson Assiniboia.
Honorable Mr. Johnson Assiniboia.
Honorable Ms. Morley Lecomte.
Honorable Ms. Morley Lecomte.
Honorable Mrs. Guimard.
Honorable Mrs. Guimard.
Honorable Mr. Wharton.
Honorable Mr. Wharton.
Honorable Mr. Johnson Interlake Gimli.
Honorable Mr. Johnson Interlake Gimli.
Honorable Mr. Teitzma.
Honorable Mr. Teitzma.
Mr. Moses.
Mr. Moses.
MLA Marcelino.
MLA Marcelino.
Ms. Naylor.
Ms. Naylor.
Ms. Lamoureux.
Ms. Lamoureux.
Mr. Mikuleski.
Mr. Mikuleski.
Mr. Smook.
Mr. Smook.
Honorable MLA Klein.
Honorable MLA Klein.
Mr. Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Mrs. Cox.
Mrs. Cox.
Mr. Wishart.
Mr. Wishart.
Mr. Lajmodier.
Mr. Lajmodier.
Mr. Ginter.
Mr. Ginter.
MLA Lindsay.
MLA Lindsay.
Mr. Malloway.
Mr. Malloway.
Mr. Bushy.
Mr. Bushy.
Mr. Sandu.
Mr. Sandu.
Honorable Mr. Gerard.
Honorable Mr. Gerard.
Mr. Eichler.
Mr. Eichler.
All those opposed to the motion, please rise. We'll now move to the virtual members. Please, when recognized, turn your microphone on, speak clearly, and I'll let the clerks proceed with that.
Mr. Brar.
I vote yes.
Mr. Brar votes yes.
Mr. Lagasse.
I vote yes.
Mr. Lagasse votes yes. Good job, Rebecca. Yeas 34, nays 0.
I declare the motion carried. The hour being 12 noon, this House is recessed and stands recessed until 1:30 p.m. today.